Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I want to talk about these new Charlie Kirk texts that Candace Owens released yesterday. And, for those who don't know, there's been a lot of conspiracy theories over the death of Charlie Kirk. A lot of people don't believe that Charlie Kirk was merely assassinated by a, troubled young man who was radicalized by the far left. The suspect who's in custody, he had a transgender, I would say boyfriend, but I guess girlfriend, It was a biological male who identifies as a female, as a woman, woman. That was this dude's quote unquote girlfriend, okay? You know, the f the fact that he had a trans girlfriend, the fact that he had the word, like, "Catch this fascist" on, like, the bullets or whatever, it's to me, I always assumed that the person who assassinated Charlie Kirk was just some radical left-winger, many such cases, particularly when it involves trans people, and Charlie Kirk was an outspoken critic of the trans movement, as you should be. Transgenderism goes against, you know, human nature and the way we've, organized society for, you know, centuries, That's not to say, you don't have examples where you have a biological woman who doesn't fit certain stereotypes or norms, or, a man, the same thing, but that doesn't mean that, a biological man can become a woman in the same way that biological women are women. It's just nonsense. So when I found out that this guy, the suspect, had a transgender girlfriend, some of the writings we saw on the bullets and everything, it's okay. This is a case of a troubled young man who got radicalized probably in college, and because he had a transgender girlfriend, wanted to take out Charlie Kirk because Charlie, rightfully so, was a big critic of the trans movement. Okay. But a lot of people on the right don't buy that story. They don't believe it. They don't believe that the individual in custody, Tyler Robinson, is the person who killed Charlie Kirk. Or at the very least, they think there might be more to the story. And there's a lot of anti-Israel sentiment on the right at the moment. I think rightfully so. I'm not going to get into it to such great detail, but I think what Israel is doing in Gaza is horrible. Whether you consider it a genocide or not, it's like, you know, it's like when you cheat on your wife with a guy instead of a girl. It's like you're still cheating. Not that I would do that, but it's still cheating, okay? Whether or not Israel's committing a genocide or not, what they're doing is still horrible. They're killing innocent people, including children. They've killed thousands of children, okay? And the reality is, this isn't about getting the hostages back. This is about getting Hamas, that's true. But what this is really about is they want to ethnically cleanse Gaza, and no other countries have been willing to take the Palestinians. So the only way that they're able to ethnically cleanse Gaza right now is by killing people, by committing a genocide, okay? And, and that also helps them take out Hamas, by the way, because if the Palestinians aren't there, Hamas isn't there, right? So even though it's totally immoral, it actually is somewhat rational for Israel to want to, commit ethnic cleansing. And right now, their only means of doing that is by committing what I would say is a technical genocide. I don't think that's particularly but again, it doesn't really matter. Cheating is still cheating, whether you cheat with a girl or a guy, and atrocities are atrocities, whether or not it's a technical genocide or not, okay? And so and obviously, they're trying to get us, the United States, involved with all these foreign conflicts. It's ridiculous, okay? So the right, which has been the most pro-Israeli group over the last 50 years in the United States, particularly, the younger side of the right wing, people between 18 to 30, they're very, very anti-Israel. And, slowly but surely, you've seen more right-wing prominent commentators come out against Israel, or at the very least be willing to criticize Israel when they do terrible things like kill babies, like, it's like kind of a low bar. But that's progress. That's progress. The fact that people are willing to criticize Israel for killing children, we weren't seeing that on the right, at least 10 years ago. You'd see that on the left, to their credit, and the left has been ahead on the right on being skeptical of our relationship with Israel, in all fairness. But the right is starting to get to that point. And, obviously Tucker Carlson's been very critical of Israel. Candace Owens has been super critical of Israel. Nick Fuentes, you don't even have to go, he's always been critical of Israel. That's why he was essentially basically forced out of mainstream right-wing media, is because of his willingness to talk about Israel and be critical of Israel. But one of those people who had always been pro-Israel, but was starting to at least show some doubt in the U.S. relationship with Israel, was Charlie Kirk. And, he was somewhat critical, especially at the beginning, of the U.S. potentially joining Israel in its bombings of Iran. And even though Charlie, again, was a proponent of the U.S.-Israeli relationship, the fact that he interacted with so many young people, Charlie knew that getting the United States involved in a war for Israel was not popular with young people, including on the right. And, according to reports, Charlie actually went to the White House, or at least spoke to Trump and told him, that this isn't popular among young people. And Trump made big gains this past election with younger people. That's one of the reasons why he was able to win the popular vote this time and have big margins in some of the swing states unexpectedly, like Arizona, Nevada, etc. So Charlie was aware that, Israel's not popular, and he made it clear to the president and other people within the administration that, hey man, bombing Iran, when it's obviously we're just doing this to help Israel, the idea that Iran is some threat to the United States is ridiculous. I mean, you have Bibi Netanyahu on the Ben fucking Shapiro show the other day talking about Iran is developing all these weapons, or they have these weapons that they could take out major American cities. He even said that these weapons could reach Mar-a-Lago. Okay, laying it on a little thick, Bibi. Oh, they're gonna really? Iran's gonna bomb the home of the President of the United States? Really? The idea that Iran would attack the United States directly is just nonsense. Iran knows if they actually did that, they would be obliterated off the face of the earth. Iran can't survive a direct conflict with the United States. That's why after we bombed their nuclear facilities, Iran's response to us was basically, it was symbolic. They gave us a heads up. They bombed like a military base that was empty. Whenever Iran has been faced with escalating or de-escalating with the United States, they've always chosen de-escalation. They have tried to negotiate. They did with the Obama administration, with the Obama-Iran deal. Iran, the idea that Iran is this, irrational actor that just wants to destroy the United States, that's just Israeli propaganda. Okay? And young people, intuitively they know this. I'm not saying they've read the literature or they know all about Iran or, their nuclear capabilities, but at a fundamental level, just intuitively, people understand that us bombing Iran back in the summer was for the benefit of Israel, not the United States. Not the United States. And Charlie was certainly aware of this, and he let the White House know this move wouldn't be popular. And, it happened, and Charlie publicly maintained a general supportive attitude towards Israel and towards the administrator's actions, but especially after Trump got the ceasefire deal between Israel and Iran, which was good. But, Charlie would still associate himself with people who are critical of Israel. People like people like Tucker Carlson, people like Candace Owens. I mean, he's been friends with Candace Owens for years. He's always had a good relationship with Tucker Carlson. I mean, Charlie's he has a good relationship with a lot of people on the right, including people on the left, actually, to be honest. People like Dave Smith, who's also a big critic of Israel. So, however, the fact that Charlie had continued to associate himself with critics of Israel, it does appear that started to rub some of Turning Point's donors the wrong way. And Turning Point has always been a pro-Israel group. There's no question about that. That's one of the reasons why Nick Fuentes and his Groypers were banned from going to Turning Point events on college campuses, is because the Groypers are, if you don't know, are very anti-Israel, just like Nick Fuentes. And Turning Point has always made it clear that they are a pro-Israeli group, a pro-Israel group. And look, you could understand that. I don't have to be conspiratorial about it. A lot, there is a part of evangelical, Christianity that is very supportive of Israel for religious reasons. I'm not going to get into all the details. So you can understand why, a conservative group that, is not afraid to talk about religion and be Christian, you can understand why they'd be supportive of Israel. I understand that. And that was a big reason why Charlie Kirk was so publicly supportive of Israel, because of his own faith. But it appears, but here's the thing. Candace Owens was going on basically suggesting that Israel might be behind Charlie Kirk's assassination because of the fact that Charlie was critical of the United States bombing Iran. And, there was this letter that Charlie Kirk had apparently wrote to Bibi Netanyahu. And Bibi publicly said and read some of the letter and talked about how Charlie was supportive of Israel. Bibi came out and said that, of course, they had nothing to do with shooting Charlie Kirk, which, frankly, a little weird that, the Prime Minister of Israel felt the need to publicly state that they didn't kill Charlie Kirk. It's like, what? That'd be like, someone being on an airplane, standing up, and then just yelling, "I'm not a pedophile," out of the blue. It's like, I didn't think you were a pedophile before, bro, but now I'm a little suspicious. The fact that Bibi would just come out and say, "We didn't do it. We didn't kill Charlie Kirk. We had nothing to do with killing Charlie Kirk." It's like, okay. Now I think there's maybe a little bit of a percent chance that you killed Charlie Kirk. I don't know. But Candace said that Bibi misrepresented the letter Charlie had sent him. The whole letter came out, and honestly, Bibi really didn't. Charlie talked about how, he thought Israel needed to do a better job in the PR battle for Israel. But then Candace said that she had these text messages that proved that Charlie was starting to break from Israel. And, Candace is kind of cuckoo. She's being sued for claiming that that Macron's wife is really a dude. I think she's claimed that Michelle Obama's a dude, which, to be fair, Big Mike, probably true. But Candace has a lot of shit. And sometimes she's right, a lot of times she's wrong, and that's okay. That's okay, it's fine. Whatever it takes to have a prominent black female in the conservative movement, whatever it takes. But she actually did release some text messages, and one of the people who works for Turning Point, Andrew Colvett, actually confirmed the texts were real. And I'm going to read you what Charlie Kirk had to say about Israel in these text messages. "Just lost another huge Jewish donor. 2 million a year because we won't cancel Tucker. I'm thinking of inviting Candace. Jewish donors play into all the stereotypes. I cannot and will not be bullied like this, leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause." Now that's pretty interesting. So it does appear that Candace was telling the truth, that Charlie was starting to have second thoughts about Israel. And it does also corroborate other reports you've seen from people like Max Blumenthal, saying that Charlie was getting extreme pressure by the pro-Israeli groups that fund Turning Point to distance himself from the anti-Israeli voices on the right, like Candace Owens, like Tucker Carlson, etc. So you read that and you're like, is there anything to this conspiracy theory that Israel, at least in part, was responsible for Charlie Kirk's death? I gotta be honest, no. I still don't buy it. There's still zero actual proof that Israel had anything to do with assassinating Charlie Kirk. Well, now I think there's pretty strong evidence based off the text messages and even what Charlie was saying publicly about the Iranian strikes, that Charlie was starting to break a little bit with Israel. At the end of the day, he was still nominally pro-Israel. Okay. Nominally pro-Israel. And if you're Israel, why would you want to take out... Do you want young conservatives listening to Charlie Kirk, or do you want them listening to Nick Fuentes? Because Charlie Kirk being assassinated only bolsters Nick Fuentes' audience. If nothing else, it's just less competition. Nick Fuentes is a very prominent right-winger. And Charlie Kirk, if anything, was a moderating force on the young right. Nick Fuentes is a much more edgier person. He dabbles a little bit more in the resentment form of politics. He's a proclaimed, just, self-described reactionary. Charlie Kirk was not a reactionary, at least not in the way Fuentes is. So if you're Israel, who do you want young conservatives listening to, Charlie Kirk or Nick Fuentes? Well, you want them listening to Charlie Kirk because he was still nominally pro-Israel. Like, if you're going to assassinate someone, if you're Israel, you would assassinate Nick Fuentes, not Charlie Kirk. And to be clear, I don't want Nick Fuentes to be assassinated. Very against assassinations. They're lame and gay. But think of it like that. Like, there are many more people that Israel would kill before killing Charlie Kirk. Now, I guess the conspiracy theory goes is they felt betrayed by Charlie, and that's why they'd want to kill him, to send a message to the other people on the right that you can't switch up on us. But at the end of the day, for me to take this conspiracy theory seriously, there needs to be more, there's no proof, and the evidence is very weak. There needs to be much more evidence, some proof, if you want me to believe that Israel killed Charlie Kirk. I just don't buy it yet. I will say this, credit to Candace, she did, and then at the end of the day, provide some evidence of Charlie getting this pressure from Israeli donors against Turning Point. I sort of doubted her. She turned out to be right, so I give her credit. You have to be fair to people. I'm not the biggest fan of Candace, but when she provides the evidence that she claimed she had and you were skeptical, you have to give her the credit. So it's something to monitor. At the end of the day, I still think what happened with Charlie Kirk was you had a radical, disturbed young man who wanted to kill Charlie because he had a transgender girlfriend, and he felt he was obligated to do so because of Charlie's stance against transgenderism. That's what I think happened. Until we have more evidence to the contrary, that's, I understand people are skeptical of the official narrative, skeptical of the FBI. But at the end of the day, sometimes Occam's razor is Occam's razor. Sometimes the most likely explanation, many times actually, the most likely explanation by definition is the explanation. So until we get more proof that, this conspiracy theory that Israel killed Charlie Kirk, that's all it is, just a conspiracy theory. But we'll monitor the situation here at the Right Wing Populist. We will. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Check out the website, link to the website in the description on YouTube. It also should be available to check out on the podcast platforms as well. Thanks for listening, folks. Bye-bye.